Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr, and Jaylen Clark are going to be super important for the Timberwolves next season. Not just because Dillingham was a lottery pick who kinda needs to develop into Minnesota's point guard of the future as soon as possible, and not because Shannon is already an NBA ready scorer, or that Jaylen Clark looks like he could be one of the best defenders in the league, but because they play with pace, they want to get out and play in transition, and this Timberwolves team needs that if they're going to get to the next level. To put it simply, transition possessions are the most efficient way to score in basketball. Teams scored around 0.97 points per possession in half-court situations last season, but they scored 1.24 points per possession in transition. To put that in different words, that difference in efficiency is like comparing a Russell Westbrook three-point attempt to a Steph Curry three-point attempt. That's how important it is to get out in transition and get those high-value points, and Minnesota were just bad at it. They were the worst team in the league at turning defensive rebounds into fast break points, the fourth worst at turning any possession into fast break points, and in the bottom half of the league at converting live ball turnovers into transition opportunities. So while Dillingham, Shannon, and Clark aren't going to be soaking up the same usage as Anthony Edwards or Julius Randle, or even someone like Naz Reid off the bench, these three guys are going to be way more prominent next season, and they're going to inject pace into Minnesota's offense in a way they just didn't have last season. And because they're all such different players, they're going to bring that transition spark in their own unique ways. On one end of the spectrum, you have the wrecking ball that is TJ Shannon, and he's a one-man transition bucket at all times. What he does better than anybody on this roster is turn these situations where there's three defenders ahead of him and there's another defender there ready to stop him in transition and end up with an easy layup on the break. That's his superpower as a player, and the Wolves are going to look a lot different with him in the rotation doing that next season. This is a pretty good example of what they've lacked and what he brings. So when they get this rebound and their outlet against a broken floor, they have one player with the ball, two players lagging behind the play, Mike Conley running to the corner where he's not really an option in this situation, and Shannon actually bursting through the middle to provide an effective transition runner. It seems kinda simple, but being able to turn these possessions that could easily slow down into a half-court set, into a quick trigger bucket going downhill against a defense that isn't set, is just something we haven't seen from the Wolves over the past few seasons. OKC had the 11th most fast break points last season. Boston had the 10th most the year before. The Nuggets, Warriors, Bucks, and Lakers were all top 5 in their championship years before that. It's just so important to be a proficient fast break team, and while TJ Shannon isn't going to turn the Wolves from the worst to the best overnight, him being a transition torpedo will go a long way to injecting some of that mentality into this Minnesota team. But if you give Shannon some running mates who want to do the same thing, that's when Minnesota can really start to build at least like a mini identity into this core. In an ideal world, Rob Dillingham is part of that core, and already right now he fits this need for speed. Again, not only is he the type of player who sees this floor map with 3 of his teammates trailing behind him and 3 defenders in front of him and turn it into a one-man fast break, and not only is he the type of player who treats this defensive rebound as a chance to sprint away from the pack and beat everyone down the floor, but what Dillingham does is make others run. His willingness to run off those live rebounds forces someone like Anthony Edwards to move with purpose up the court. It brings Naz Reid flanking them into the game as a transition threat, rather than slipping into that slower half-court game. If he can be a catalyst to get Naz or Ant or McDaniels moving in transition alongside him, Dillingham instantly has value for this slow-moving team, even if he's going to have some flaws in other areas that we kind of expect from a young point guard. It could just be moving up the floor with the sort of pace that draws multiple defenders toward him and away from someone like Naz Reid as a trailing 3-point threat, and he's going to add such a different spice into this offense compared to Mike Conley if he does that. And if Dillingham and Shannon are doing their thing together in those bench units a ton next season, Minnesota could actually become a team with a legit transition weapon in their arsenal. I mean, look at the intent here from both of them to spearhead a quick offense against the league's best defense. I want to see more of that next season and going forward with this young core. Again, when DiVincenzo mops up this loose ball, look where they both are and how determined they are to beat the defense down the floor. That's just the best way to create easy buckets, especially for young and imperfect players. We've already seen it with Jaylen Clark as well, and even someone like Johan Beringer in Summer League. These guys aren't going to be mistake-free players by any means next season, and there is going to be some teething issues for sure, but if they're surefire transition players, that'll go a long way to keeping them effective while they find their footing in the league. Now, what Jaylen Clark brings is a little different. Sure, he can fill a lane on the break like the other two, he can start fast breaks with a quick outlet pass, but what he really does is generate turnovers with his defense, and turnovers are the number one way teams rack up transition points. Minnesota has a number of great defenders, and they are a great defense as a team, but guys like Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert are more stoppers. They aren't really turnover creators or defensive playmakers. Jaylen Clark is a master of defensive chaos, and therefore a catalyst for transition points. So if the Wolves want to spark more transition offense next season, having Jaylen Clark there causing defensive mayhem is a great place to start. Now, Clark is already an elite defensive playmaker and elite at making off-ball defensive reads. Like when Şengün turns his head here, Clark is pouncing on him, and again, it's TJ Shannon leaking out to get easy buckets on the break. Clark just reads passing lanes so well for such an inexperienced player. As soon as Naz Reid has to rotate into help here, Clark shifts off his man into the gap to tip away the pass from a rolling Walker Kessler, and against a broken floor is where Rob Dillingham can use his speed to its fullest effect. It's a risk-reward game, but having a player who can peel off his man and sniff out passes is the type of risk that will reward Minnesota with a new dynamic to their slow-paced offense. When you throw in that Clark is a fierce point of attack defender who can cover for Dillingham's weaknesses defensively and fill the space left by Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you get a player who just makes a ton of sense in a ton of different ways next season. The bulk of whatever success Minnesota has next season is still going to rest on the shoulders of Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert and the rest of their key rotation pieces, but through TJ Shannon's power, Rob Dillingham's speed, and Jaylen Clark's defensive smarts, they have a trio of pace-pushing weapons at their disposal that really could make a difference going forward. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you can support Howls and Growls in the links below. If not, you can always like this video or subscribe to the channel to see more breakdowns like this one. Thanks again for watching.